Hello, it's Valerie of Valerie's and welcome to another video. Today I'm doing the For the Love of Classics book tag, which was originally created by Yamini from The Skeptical Reader as well as Ange from Beyond the Pages. And they both tagged me to do this, so of course I'm obliging. And just to preface this, I'm not the biggest classics reader, but I do love modern classics, so if any of these questions don't really apply to classics that I've read, I'll just throw in a modern classic in there because I love modern classics. So let's get into the question. Question number one is, why do you read classics and how often do you read them? And I normally read classics because they're sort of a guaranteed good read, and even if they're not good, you're still part of this bigger conversation that could have possibly been going on for decades or centuries depending on when the book actually came out, and I like kind of being in on all those references over time. Like when I first read East of Eden by John Steinbeck, it was such a revelation to finally know what Timshel meant. So yeah, just being a part of the bigger conversation, and I often find that classics and modern classics are more relatable and have universal themes, and sometimes they feel more modern than an actual book that was published in the past decade. As for how often I read them, I think every third or second read I try to throw in at least a modern classic in there, since I really enjoy them and they're sort of my go-to. Question number two is, what is a period, country, or culture that you haven't read many classics from and would like to? And I'm really bad for reading a lot of classics in general, but especially translated classics. So any non-English classic are ones that I really need to get to, and I think I'll start off with the Russian. So this is The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov and Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Question number three is, which modern book do you think will be a classic in 100 years' time? And I definitely think anything that's won the Pulitzer is probably going to be galvanized in time for a while, so things like The Goldfinch I think might be around, even though I haven't read that one. But here is another Pulitzer winner. This is Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. I think family sagas and stories kind of spanning long periods of time I think are good contenders for classic literature. Same goes for White Teeth by Zadie Smith. It involves families and cultures and really paints the picture of a culture in a very specific time and place, so I think this will definitely stick around for quite a while, and I think this is even being taught in schools already, so I hope this sticks around. And I think this is already considered a modern classic, but I definitely think The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan, which is another book about family relationships and culture, this is another book that will stick around for a really long time, I hope. Question number four is, what was the last classic you read? And that was Mildred Pierce by James M. Cain. Question number five is, what was the first classic you ever read? And I believe that was Wuthering Heights when I was 12 years old, and that was a big mistake because I didn't understand it. I hated it. I thought it was so boring and weird, and I just didn't know what was going on. And to be honest, the whole reason that I read it was because it was referenced a ton in the Twilight books, and I wanted to be like Bella and Edward, and I wanted to read Wuthering Heights and fall in love, but I was 12, so that didn't work out. Question number six is, what are your favorite classic book covers? And I always have to go with these vintage classics editions of Jane Austen's works. I think they are so cute and colorful and wonderful. I love everything about them, from the watercolor design to the typography and just everything about them. They have wonderful quotes on the back from the text as well, and they just make a beautiful set. I have all of them but Mansfield Park, so I will get that eventually, and then my set will be complete and my life will finally have meaning. Question number seven is, classic authors you wish had written more books? And of course, once again, Jane Austen. 6 novels is not enough. We need more. Same goes for Shirley Jackson, who's pretty much my favorite author. I have only a handful of books left in her bibliography that I have yet to read, and that's really upsetting. And same goes for Oscar Wilde. I think The Picture of Dorian Gray is his only novel, and the rest of his works are plays and things like that, so I definitely really appreciate if Oscar Wilde could come back from the dead and write some more novels, because I'll be talking about this more later. Question number 8 is, what is your least favorite classic? And this was a bit hard for me to choose, but I distinctly remember disliking The Stranger by Albert Camus. A lot of people will be dismissive when you say you don't like a classic or a modern classic and tell you that you didn't get it or you missed the point. And you can definitely say that for me. I didn't get it, I missed the point, I thought it was stupid and boring and just about a guy making observations about life, and I didn't care about his observations. So yeah, I didn't like The Stranger, I didn't get it, move on. Question number 9 is favorite translated classic, and I think so far I've only read one, which was Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert, so by default that one wins, even though I enjoyed it, but it's definitely not my favorite at all. Question number 10 is favorite modern classic, and that has to go to these two, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier and We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. These are both very dark and atmospheric and fantastic, and they both have everything that I love in a novel, but they're both very different as well, so check these out if you like creepy books written by badass women. Question number 11 is classic literary place you'd like to visit, and that would have to be Bath in England because Jane Austen lived there and I would love to just sort of walk in the same street that she did, and I think I might even be going this spring in May if my boyfriend decides to take me, so it's up to him. Question 12 is first classic you would recommend for a child, and that would be I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. This book on the back says it's recommended for ages 12 and up. I'll give it to, you know, ages 9 and up. I think the preteen age would be a great age to read this book, even though our main character is 17 years old. I think it's just a sweet and delightful story about family and coming of age, and it's just so warm and fuzzy, and I think I would have really enjoyed this if I had read this when I was 12 rather than reading Wuthering Heights. I think this would have been a lot more appropriate for 12-year-old Val. Question number 13 is classics you think are mistitled and what would you retitle them? And my pick is Moby Dick or The Whale by Herman Melville, and I would just rename this to Whales, or the Encyclopedia of Whales, because that's pretty much all this book is about. Sure, Moby Dick is in there and we have some fun characters, but I'd say maybe 60% of this book is whale facts, so I think just naming it Whales, people would be a bit more prepared for the contents of this book. And finally, question 14 is your favorite classic you'd recommend to everyone. And here it is again. This is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. It's short, it's dark, it's funny, it's sexy. I don't see how anyone could dislike this book, and I think it's a very good beginner classic for someone who's trying to get into it. I just think this is a good representative for what classic literature can be, since some people think classic can be a bit stuffy and dated. I think this is still very modern and very cool, if I can say so myself. Says the person who talks about books on the internet. And that was the For the Love of Classics book tag. Question number 15 asked me to tag people, so I will finally tag people. I think I'll tag Crystal Marsh and Adam from Memento Mori, Stephanie from Time to Read if you have time to do a tag, and yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye!